Hello everybody. If I look a little bit dishevelled, it's because I have been on my bed finishing the end of this books. Because as you can tell, this is Sequel Sunday. I started reading this book in the beginning of November, and the reason I know that is because I started reading this at the beginning of the run of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at Lee's Playhouse. That was where I was reading the majority of this book, was at the theatre when I wasn't inside the auditorium. So, if you look at my social media, my Instagram, you'll probably know what book this is. But anyway, it's The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is a very old book. I have determined from the dates inside that I think this version was published in 1973. That is the latest date on the inside of this book. And this cover is very, very close to the cover on the Wikipedia page for the stories, which was the first single volume edition, which was published in 1968. This is all 3 books, or if you want to be finicky about it, all 6 books in one book. And as I was reading it, the front cover came off and it has been held together with sellotape. I think there needs to be sellotape on the outside as well, not just on the inside, so I think we need to sort that. And my dad is not completely sure where the book came from, and to be honest, he thinks he might have borrowed it from my Uncle Paul, which is one of my mum's sister's husbands. So, sorry Uncle Paul, if this was yours, and I have no idea how long we've had it. So, as I said, technically there's 6 books in here because each book has 2 parts to it, and I'll admit it was a good book. I understand why it's up there as like one of the best books ever written and one of the best selling books ever written, but it's not a book I think I'd read again. To be fair, I'm not really much of a book rereader, but I have absolutely no plans to read this again. I found it very long to read, and for somebody who's usually quite a quick reader, I did struggle a little bit. The only other book that's ever done that to me was a Clive Barker book called Imagica, and that took me years to read. Years. Like, I'd pick it up, put it down, forget about it, pick it up again and go, and have to start again because it was just so wordy. It was a big book, kind of like this one. And yeah, I think of the 3 books, as I was reading them, I think it was when I got to like the second part of the 3rd book, I was in the frame of mind of, I think of the 3, the 2nd book was my favourite, with the 3rd book was actually ended up becoming quite close second place. It's close because I felt like it went on longer than it needed to. Almost it's just like, I feel like it could be wrapped up now, but then at the same time there was a character that needed to have its end, which is why I kind of understand why it kept going beyond the destroying of the ring. I feel like I'm talking without actually saying anything about it. You've got your 4 main hobbits that you are following throughout the story, and they're actually split up quite early on. Is it in the 2nd book they get split up, I think? Yeah, I think it's like towards the beginning of the 2nd book that they end up getting split up. So you've got Frodo, Pippin, Sam and Merry, and at the beginning of the book Bilbo passes this magical ring to Frodo, his cousin, and nobody really knows the origins of the ring, but then the wizard Gandalf comes along and says, I think that is a ring of power, and he proves the point by throwing the ring into the fire, at which point you can see all this writing illuminating on the ring that shows you how much power there is behind the ring. And I must admit, the backstory into the ring and the introduction of like Smeagol, I actually really enjoyed learning about like that backstory, but the 1st book just feels very long-winded. I feel like it's the longest book of all of them, because if anything, I think the 3rd book is the shortest of them all, in which it wraps everything up. But yeah, the 1st book just felt very long and wordy, and not quite as much happens in the 1st books as does in the 2nd and the 3rd, where everything kind of starts to speed up a bit more. So yeah, I just found the 1st book quite slow to get through, because a lot of it is just them walking. and the initial introduction of the Black Riders who were chasing them, and they keep popping up throughout the story because they're being chased for this ring because it holds so much power. And Sméagol, Gollum, as most people know that character, you're introduced to that backstory quite early on, and the downfall of that character in regards to the power that the ring holds. And obviously Sméagol is there kind of all the way to the end, because there's a point, I think it's in the second book, where Sméagol actually ends up, even though he's like, my precious, obviously an impression from the film, but Sméagol is so obsessed with the power that the ring gives. There's a point when Sméagol kind of provides a route for Frodo and Sam, and you're just thinking, oh, is Sméagol actually having his like almost hero moment? Because I generally find that the main villain of the story really is Saruman and the ring, because it all kind of comes back to that. Can you tell that my brain is just completely processing everything? I literally finished reading this book like 5 minutes ago. I'm just processing it all. I felt like I did glaze over a little bit more during reading the first book, just because it's just such a big book, and it's just so much backstory and so much of them just walking almost aimlessly, even though they do have a goal, because straight away Gandalf tells Frodo that there's only one way to destroy the ring, and that is what his mission is throughout the 3 books, is trying to get to a particular place where he can destroy the ring. And I might as well just spoil it, because I think a lot of people will have read the books or seen the movies, with the fact that both Sméagol and the ring are taken down in the same way. Because there were points when I was just thinking, does Sméagol actually deserve to die? But then at the same time I was just there thinking, well, it's the only thing that's ever going to provide that character any kind of peace, because Sméagol is completely lost to the ring. Even when it came to the point when Sam is thinking, should I kill Sméagol? And both Sam and Frodo are at the point where they're just like, this is not the way to do it. So then when Sméagol actually sees the ring and they're at the place where the ring can be destroyed, and then Sméagol like bites Frodo's finger off and then falls, it's just like, this was the only way to do it, because the idea of Sméagol living on when the ring was destroyed, it was just like, there would always be a question mark over it. There would always be a question mark over Sméagol if the ring got destroyed and Sméagol was left with nothing. Because the only thing that Sméagol was like living for throughout all the books, even look at the backstory, is the ring, because it completely overpowered him. And it's interesting to see kind of the character development and changes depending on who's holding the ring. They're basically wearing the ring around a chain around their necks, but they can feel that energy kind of depleting them, and the almost mood swings that happen. Because there's a point in the 3rd book where Frodo has got the ring around his neck and he's getting, like, he's walking, he's tired, they've run out of water and food, and they're wearing all like this heavyweight armour to protect themselves, and Sam can see Frodo is struggling so much. I mean, they're both pretty much in the same boat at that point, but it's just like Sam can tell that Frodo is just completely, there's like nothing left of him, because as well as all the aforementioned things, he's also got the ring bearing him down as well, because the power is just sucking the life out of him. But then when Sam goes, oh, let you know, I've worn the ring before, let me hold it for you. And just that instant switch of personality of Frodo going, no, it's mine, you're going to steal it. And then having that moment of coming back and going, oh, wait, no, I didn't mean it. It's just the power. But at the same time, I don't want you to go through this, because this is my burden to bear. You know, this has been my mission since the day that my cousin Bilbo gave me this ring, and that Gandalf told me what I had to do. At the end of the day, the whole mission is Frodo's, even though he's got the support of the other hobbits going through. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just like Frodo had to do it with somebody else. He couldn't do it completely by himself. You can tell I enjoyed it, and the storyline did go in even through the bit where I felt like I was going over slightly thinking, oh god. There were certain bits that also I read a bit quicker than others, mainly because of like the poetry and the songs, so I definitely read those bits quicker. But there was certain points when it felt like there was a lot of repetition, especially when it came to the names and things. It was kind of like when I read Harry Potter for the first time, there were certain bits where I felt like I was making up pronunciations because I just didn't know how to pronounce them. And there'll be a lot of people going out there, just watch the films. And it was just like, no, I wanted to read the books, knowing pretty much nothing, because I feel like when I was growing up, you either watched the Harry Potter films or you watched the Lord of the Rings films, and because they were kind of round about the same time. I'm sure there were plenty of people going, well, I watched both and I enjoyed them both, but it did very feel much like a Harry Potter versus Lord of the Rings, even though they're completely different things. And I'll admit, as I was reading this, I felt like there were a few things, even though obviously it's nothing to do with, I mean, have got wizards in this, but and they're completely different storylines. But there were points when I was reading this and I just thought, I'm getting some Harry Potter elements, and also because of the religious undertones and themes to the Lord of the Rings, I also felt myself drawing on when I read the Narnia books. So there was a little bit of comparison happening in my mind based on other things that I have read in series, and where I thought that maybe other things have like taken inspiration from the Lord of the Rings, or where the Lord of the Rings has taken inspiration from other works as well. But yeah, I feel like I've said everything but nothing. Because there's just so much. There's so much. But ultimately it is book of the journey, because you know that by the end it's only going to go one of two ways, and that's either he's going to fulfill his mission and destroy the ring, or he's not. But the fact that it is Lord of the Rings and it is just the 3 books, you know that ultimately Frodo has to do it. Like, that's the only acceptable ending, because, well, unless he doesn't do it and he just dies. There was a point when it felt like there was a lot of things like, oh, is this one of those books just where everybody dies, but then everybody came back? And it just like, just when you thought somebody had died, they'd come back. There was a point when you think that Frodo has died, and then you're just like, oh wait, no, he's still alive, and Sam goes off in his mission in the 3rd book and going, I've been told he's still alive, so I'm going to go find him. It also happens with Gandalf. There's a point when you think Gandalf has died, and then he comes back, and it's just like... It's very much just like, I am not dead, I have come back. I think, for me, the main story that kind of kept me going was the Sméagol-Gollum storyline. That's the same person, it's just that Gollum is who Sméagol becomes. And I'll admit, for somebody who hasn't really watched the movies, like, I've seen bits of the movies, I am very aware of what Andy Serkis did to play Sméagol, and I think that Andy Serkis is an incredible actor, and it is just ridiculous that he wasn't eligible for an Oscar for what he did as Gollum, because it was a very physical role for him, because he was in the motion capture suit, and the way he kind of transforms himself. When you look at the behind the scenes pictures and videos of Andy Serkis as Gollum, it's mind-blowing that what he did wasn't eligible for an Oscar. Because a lot of people say, oh, it's just voice work. It's like, it's so much more than voice work when he's putting his whole body into that motion capture suit. Everything that he did gave you what you saw of Gollum on the screen. For me, the whole backstory with Sméagol and Gollum's storyline going through, and then how it ends for Gollum, I feel like I'm just using Gollum and Sméagol interchangeably, because they're essentially the same person. It's just Sméagol is who he was at the beginning, and Gollum is what the ring made him. I feel like I need to watch the movies now to see if what I've read influences the way I watch it. A lot of the time I prefer to read the source material. I like to read the books first before I watch the movies, though there have been instances in which I've done it the other way around. But most of the time I do genuinely prefer the books anyway, just because there's a lot more to work with. Was it just 3 movies? Or did they put one of them into 4? I'm not completely sure. Oh, it was just 3. I thought it was like Harry Potter, where they did the last movie into 2 things, but no, it's just 3. You've got The Fellowship of the Ring, 2 Towers, and The Return of the King, just like the books. But yeah, because I mean, it's 3 films for me to watch and do a bit of compare and contrast in my head. I think there were certain points in the book where it was just like, I'm sure that will have had to have been changed for the films, because some of it felt a bit on the nose and like not acceptable by today's standards, but at the same time, you know, 2001, 2002, 2003 is when those movies came out, and the early noughties is very different to what we think now in 2023, because that was over 20 years ago. Oh god, that makes me feel old. As I said, I haven't watched any of it, so I went in pretty much completely not knowing much. As I've been saying to people, I think it was the 2nd film on my French exchange, where I watched probably about half of it in French with English subtitles. That was the point where I was just like, I don't think I'm into these films. But now that I've read the books, I feel like I've got a bit more of a connection to it, because I've read all 1,079 pages of it. Was it 79? It was something like that. But yeah, ultimately, I did enjoy the stories. I feel like the second book was probably my favourite, just because of how much backstory you got of Sméagol, and understanding what happened to Sméagol and how we became Gollum. I don't know why I find that completely fascinating, just seeing how this power just completely destroyed this one person, and how they became the person that they were, and how that leads to his downfall. Even when you see snippets of Sméagol becoming a slightly good person as Gollum, the ring always brings him back. Which is why by the end I'm just there thinking, at the point when Sam says, I'm not going to kill him, and I'm just like, but at this point it seems like that's the only thing you can do to be actually kind to Sméagol, because when the ring is destroyed, Sméagol just has nothing left to live for. So it's just like, Sméagol has to die. Sméagol has to die. And yeah, the way that it does end for Sméagol, as I said, when the ring gets destroyed, Sméagol goes with it. It was just like, yeah, that was the only way it really could end. That was the only way for the ring and Sméagol to go together. So that was The Lord of the Rings. I have finally finished this book, but this definitely needs more sellotape, because it's got sellotape kind of double-sided a little bit just on this side, but it definitely needs some more sellotape on the other side, because otherwise it's just going to come off. But yeah, that is a big book. But yeah, if you do have any recommendations for me for books, put them in the comments. Please chat to me. I have seen things where people have been talking to me about other books that I've talked about in regards to whether it's helped them with something they've been studying at school, and I hope people aren't using my videos to cheat, but I hope it does help with helping to understand certain themes. But yeah, for me, the ultimate thing for this is just, it's the power, and how power can completely destroy people, and the fact that as a person, when you see Frodo throughout all three of the books, the fact that even though he does have his moments toward the end where he's just like, no, it's mine, you're stealing it, but then he has his moment of clarity where it's just like, wait, I know that is not me. Yeah, power can do horrible things to people, but at the end of the day, I feel like it heightens people's personality. Frodo gets to that point when he's just like, I am not going to let the power of this ring change who I am, because it's not me. Because it's not. And then at the end, when he finally leaves and says, you know what, I've come back, I've done what I needed to do, this mission is over, the ring is finally destroyed, and I need to move on. And after going home, he goes like, no, this isn't really home for me anymore, and I just need to leave. Yeah. It's a very, very powerful series, and I have seen things about where people say, like, there isn't enough, like, it feels like a story for boys. But the fact is, there are still actually 3 female characters in there that feel quite strong. And I think for the films, they did put a little bit more of female empowerment into it, because it is such boy heavy. But it didn't change the fact that as a woman reading these books, I still found it entertaining and found a way to identify with the male characters. You don't have to be the same sex, gender, whatever as a character to find something to identify with. But at the same time, you don't have to identify with a character to be able to actually, like, empathise and things, and, like, understand the story. Yeah, basically the idea that I couldn't enjoy this book because it's boy heavy is just ridiculous. Yeah. Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes, I have lived under a rock. Yeah. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video. Mwah. Stay safe, everybody.